Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Now, today's story is actually going to be a rather dark one, and it does involve some children dying. So if that is sensitive for you guys, I would suggest clicking out of this video and joining me in the next one. Now, today's story is very, very strange. The more I read into it, the more unusual it became, and I just tried to put myself in this person's shoes and really think about what can make me do something like this, something so outrageous and uncharacteristic of who everyone said this person was. And I also remember hearing about this case. This case actually took place in 2009, so it did happen quite a while ago, but I do remember hearing about it. It was huge on the media. I just didn't understand the intensity of the case at the time until I started looking into it before I did this video. But before we get into today's story, I just want to send a quick reminder to please consider subscribing if you guys enjoy this type of content. Of course, as you know by now, we like to talk about true crime, paranormal, unsolved mysteries, and we also post 2 to 3 times a week. So if that interests you, then please consider subscribing or hit the like button. It really does help us grow here on YouTube. Alright, so let's get into today's story. Now, today's story is about a woman called Diane Schuler. Now, I'm sure a lot of you might have heard of her. This name might sound familiar to you because, like I said earlier, it was a huge story. It was all over the news in 2009. Diane was described as being a fabulous mom. She was considered the perfect mom, the perfect example of a PTA mom. She was involved with her children's lives. She adored her children, and her children truly adored her. And to this day, her husband actually absolutely refuses to believe that Diane would have done what she did purposely. He still figures that there was some sort of outside force or some sort of unexpected emergency that happened that actually caused this entire event to occur. Now, this event took place on July 26, 2009. Now, this was a weekend, and Diane was actually out camping with her husband, her 2 kids, Brian and Aaron, as well as with 3 of her nieces that were actually from her brother's side. They had actually spent the weekend at Hunter Lake Campground in Parksville, New York, and they were set to make the 3-hour drive from there to West Babylon. At approximately 9:30 a.m., Diane took the red minivan and she packed the car with her 2 kids and her 3 nieces. Now, her husband actually took a separate car, I believe it was a pickup truck, and he set off for home with their family dog. Before they left the campground that day, one of the campground owners actually had a brief conversation with Diane, and he recalled seeing her acting completely fine. She was totally normal, nothing out of the ordinary. They were just ready to go home after a weekend out camping. On their way back home, Diane made a few stops, which are considered normal on any road trip. So her first stop was at a McDonald's, and this is where the children had grabbed some food. They actually got out to play at the playground for a bit. Here at the McDonald's, Diane was actually also reported as having a conversation with one of the cashiers or one of the managers at the McDonald's while she waited for the order that the kids were waiting for. And it was reported that she was completely normal. She didn't seem like she was out of it. Nothing unusual here either. Now, the next stop that she did was at a gas station, and the gas station attendant actually reported that she was looking for some pain meds, over-the-counter pain meds. It's not known why she was looking for them, but there are some suspicions, and we'll get into those later. Unfortunately, the gas station didn't have any, and so Diane left. He also said that Diane seemed completely fine. She was coherent, absolutely nothing wrong with her at this time. Now, at approximately 11 a.m., things start going downhill. Diane actually made a call to her brother Warren to let him know that they had hit some traffic and that they would likely be a little bit late. Shortly after this phone call, witnesses on the highway started calling in 911, saying that they were seeing Diane's red minivan just driving completely erratic. Like, she was driving like an absolute crazy person. She was tailgating people. She was honking at people aggressively. She was swerving in and out of lanes. It almost seemed like a scene out of the Fast and the Furious. Someone had even actually reported seeing the red minivan pulled over with the woman out on the side of the road actually throwing up. At approximately 1 p.m., another phone call was made to Warren coming from Diane's cell phone, except it wasn't Diane this time. It was actually one of his daughters calling him. And he said that she sounded a little bit worried. She was very, very confused about what was happening. She said that Aunt Diane actually had a hard time seeing. Diane then takes the phone and talks to her brother and tells him that she's having a hard time seeing and that she's feeling really, really disoriented. This is believed to have happened when she was actually pulled over at the side of the road. Now, Warren tells Diane, okay, just calm down. I will come get you guys. Just stay put, stay there, don't get in the car. He was genuinely concerned that there was something medically wrong with Diane at this point, and he didn't want to risk her getting into an accident. He didn't want her driving, especially with 5 kids in the car. So he tells her, stay put, I will come get you. Now, for unknown reasons, Diane did not listen, and she actually also left her cell phone behind at this pit stop. At approximately 1:33 p.m., 4 phone calls came into 911 at the exact same time, all reporting the exact same thing. They were saying that a red minivan was driving down the highway in the opposite direction. It's estimated that Diane was driving between 75 and 80 miles per hour, or 120 and 137 kilometers an hour. And she was driving in the opposite direction, like I mentioned earlier, and witnesses all reported that she had a very serious look on her face. It looked like she was determined to get somewhere and that no one was going to get in her way and no one was going to stop her. The van actually traveled in the opposite direction for approximately 1.7 miles or 2.7 kilometers until 1:35 p.m. when it actually collided with another car. It actually collided with the Chevrolet Trailblazer that had several people in the car, and this car actually hit another Chevrolet car which also had several people in there as well. Right away on impact, police were able to determine that Diane had died, her daughter Erin had died, and 2 of her nieces had also died. The 3 men in the first Chevrolet truck that she hit had died right away as well. The other people in the other Chevrolet truck luckily escaped with minor injuries. As soon as the accident happened, there were 2 witnesses that immediately ran towards the van. They were able to pull Diane out of the driver's seat, but the first thing they noticed is that there was a fairly large, empty, broken vodka bottle on the floor in front of the driver's seat. This then sparked a huge media frenzy. It sparked a very, very large investigation, and definitely a lot more questions were left unanswered in this case. Now, Diane's son was actually the only actual survivor of this crash. He was actually in the back seat underneath a pile of the other children, and it's assumed that this pile is actually what saved him. And unfortunately, it is rather sad. None of the children were wearing their seatbelts that day, and it is believed that if they had been wearing their seatbelts, it's very likely that they would be still alive. Now, one of Diane's nieces had initially survived the crash, but when she was taken to the hospital, she actually ended up dying due to her injuries. So right away, taking the vodka as a leading piece of evidence, the police do a toxicology report on Diane, and they actually find out that she had 2 times the legal limit of alcohol absorbed into her bloodstream, and she also had 6 grams of vodka still in her stomach that hadn't been absorbed at the time of the crash. Shockingly, she also had very, very high levels of THC in her system approximately 15 minutes before the crash. Now, finding out this information, Diane's family was literally completely shocked. This was very, very unusual of Diane. They classified her as being the complete opposite person. There's no way she would have put herself in this position. There's no way she would have put her children or her nieces in this position as well. It was just the most unbelievable set of circumstances. And to this day, her family has absolutely no idea what really happened or what could have caused her to do something like this. So keeping in mind the several reports that came through earlier where she stopped at the McDonald's, she stopped at the gas station before she left the campground, everyone that interacted with Diane prior to the accident all said that she was completely coherent, that she was fine. It seemed like she was just on her way home after a weekend out with her family. There was absolutely no signs that she could have been intoxicated or under any sort of substance. However, people seem to believe that the fact that it seems like she could have been drunk and that she was possibly high, that it does add up with the reports of witnesses seeing a woman parked on the side of the highway throwing up. Now, Diane's husband Daniel claimed that Diane never drank. She definitely didn't do drugs, but that quickly changed. He later ended up admitting, just due to so much pressure, that Diane did actually drink sometimes, but that she definitely didn't have a problem. He said that she did drink during the camping weekend, but that the night before she drove the kids home, she hadn't been drinking, and that the only time she used THC was to sleep. She was definitely not addicted to the substance. She would never abuse either of these substances, but that's as much as he was willing to admit. So what could have caused Diane, who seemed like a perfect, fun-loving mother, a dedicated mother, to do something so horrific? I just want to say before we get into the theories that we mean absolutely no disrespect here. We're just talking about several theories that we've seen across the internet. Now, the first and the leading theory here is that Diane was a high-functioning alcoholic. Now, the thing with high-functioning alcoholics is that they're usually very, very good at hiding it from people. It suggested that being a mom, being a dedicated mom that she was, had taken a serious toll on her. And being on that road trip that day with 5 young kids in the back seat was likely not the easiest thing to do by yourself. It's not known why her and her husband decided to go in separate cars that day, but for her to take care of 5 kids would have been a heavy task to do on her own. Now, there's a few traits here that point towards the idea that Diane could have been a secret alcoholic. Now, because they keep all of this information to themselves, they do their best to hide it from their friends, their family, from their work colleagues. It makes sense that Diane's entire family completely denied all of these accusations, even when presented with the evidence. It's very common for the family to be left out in the cold and be completely unaware of the reality going on in this person's life. Secondly, if she was a high-functioning alcoholic, this could explain a little bit more of her reasoning that day. Was she so used to drinking and doing things drunk that she felt like she could handle some vodka and drive under the influence that day and still manage to get home on her own? Was this something that she had done in the past and therefore felt like it was a reasonable thing to do, that there was minimal risk involved? These are some of the questions that I've seen floating around, and honestly, it does make a little bit of sense when you put it all together. Now, the fact that she was looking for some painkillers actually led people to dig a little bit deeper, and some people seem to believe that the reason she was actually looking for painkillers at the gas station that day is because she had a pretty bad toothache. In the surveillance video, you can actually see her rubbing her cheek, and that's suspected that it's actually the tooth pain that was causing her to look for some Tylenol that day. So not being able to find Tylenol, she actually decided to take some vodka in hopes that it would reduce the pain until she was able to get home. Now, there's a specific theory that is kind of like a sub-theory of this original theory, and it is quite intense. So I will go through it with you guys. It's not my personal belief, but it does make a lot of sense, which is why I felt like I should include it here as well. So having had a very long, tiring, but fun weekend with 5 kids, Diane was probably really tired and really just ready to go home. Now, on top of that, if you include a toothache, she was probably running low on patience, running low on energy, and the only thing on her mind was to get home and just, get some sleep. Now, considering that her husband did admit that they were drinking at the campsite that weekend, it's not unreasonable to believe that she could have very likely been hungover that morning. Now, to put that together with screaming children, the toothache, a bad hangover, an intense headache, not a really good set of circumstances, especially when you're about to go on a 3-hour drive. This could be why she decided to grab that bottle of vodka, It might not have it obviously was not the right thing to do, but this is speculated to be the reason why she decided to grab the bottle before leaving the campsite that day. The only problem here is that she had to be discreet. How was she going to drink vodka in the car with 5 little witnesses in the back seat? Now, like I mentioned earlier, when they stopped at McDonald's, the kids had actually also gotten out to play in the playground. Now, when you're driving home from a road trip and you have a bunch of kids in the back, the last thing most parents want to do is kind of delay that whole process. So stopping to play at the playground struck people as being unusual. It's believed that she used this as an excuse to stop and kind of discreetly either spike one of her drinks or sneak in a few shots of the vodka at this point while the kids were occupied. However, it's not known why she actually drank in excess. Maybe she didn't know, maybe she didn't realize how much she was drinking. Maybe she knew what her limit was and then accidentally went over it. Maybe the toothache was getting to be too much and she thought she could handle a little bit more. It's not really known, and I don't think we'll ever know really what her true process was that day. And it's suspected that the THC was actually ingested by her in an attempt to balance out the effects that the alcohol was having for her. Unfortunately, this probably had a bad reaction in her stomach, in her system overall, and this could be why she was seen pulled over throwing up. Now, what Diane was not expecting to happen was one of her nieces calling their father, her brother, and telling them what was going on. So in an attempt to cover it up, Diane grabs the cell phone, tells him that she's just feeling sick and that she can't really function properly right now. Now it's suspected here that knowing that another adult now knew that there was something wrong, this freaks out Diane. She figures that if her brother actually shows up and he gets there and he sees that she is heavily intoxicated, that she's high on substances, that she is going to face some serious consequences. There's potential jail time. She could be faced with many lawsuits. She could lose custody of her children. So knowing all of this in mind, keeping all of this in mind, she probably freaks out at this point. This is probably why she decided to leave her cell phone on the side of the road, so all of the other phone calls would go unanswered and the other kids couldn't continue to make phone calls as well. This is also explained as to why she likely didn't just stay there and wait for her brother to come. She probably figured that she could beat the odds and get home before anyone found out what was actually going on. Now, this could also actually explain several witnesses' accounts when they called 911. Everyone said that she had a very determined and serious look on her face and that it seemed like she was focused on staying in between the lines. Now, this could be because she was so intoxicated, she probably felt like she had to be hyper-focused on what she was doing at that moment. And her only focus at that second was staying in between the lines, which actually took away the other elements of what it is to drive on the highway. She probably completely didn't even realize that she was going in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, it seemed like she had absolutely no idea of where she was going, and she just tried to stay as focused as possible until she finally blacked out or just completely lost control of the car, considering how fast it was going. Theory number 2 is that Diane actually had some sort of medical episode. And this is the theory her husband, Daniel, seems to believe and still believes to this day. A lot of her family is very confused as to how something so out of character for her could have taken place. So they seem to believe that she had some sort of medical episode, something like a heart attack, maybe a brain aneurysm, but the autopsy reports don't support this theory at all. The only thing that came back and that stood out were her intoxication reports. Now, this third theory is actually a little bit more intense, and I just want to insert another little disclaimer here. The third theory says that this could have been a murder-suicide. Now, there's a documentary called There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane, and I think it was done by Dateline NBC, and based on the different reports and interviews in this documentary, a lot of online web sleuths have put together this third theory. It seems, or they seem to think, that Diane actually had enough of the people in her life, that she was completely done being the only person that would give and give and give. she was really just tired of being surrounded by takers. It suggested that she had a lot of rage inside of her, and her childhood didn't make it any easier. It said that her mother was actually a very, very awful mother to her. It wasn't much of a mother at all, and actually forced her to take on more of a maternal role from a very, very early age. So it seems like Diane was not only forced to take care of herself as a young child, but she was also forced to take care of her mother, her quote ungrateful father, and her ungrateful brothers. And as life goes on, she actually ends up getting married, and sadly she ends up marrying a man who ends up being exactly like her family, like her father, like her brothers. Unfortunately, this level of stress only adds to her rage as she continues to be expected to take care of not just herself, but her husband and her kids all by herself. She was really, really allegedly growing tired of being the only caretaker and having leeches basically surround her life and literally just take and take and take from her without caring to ask about how she's doing or if she needs help. Now, it's suspected that something happened at the campsite that weekend and that this could have been a potential trigger for her, that she could have decided that enough was enough, and that she actually was not a secret drinker, that the decision to take the bottle of vodka with her was done with purpose and intentional. Continuing on with the reason she grabbed the bottle of vodka, it said that because she was such a nice woman, because she had a big heart and she was so kind and giving, that she knew doing something like this would be almost impossible for someone like her. So to help her carry out this heinous crime, she figured that she would need some liquid courage, which is why she decided to grab the bottle. Now, this final act of hers could be seen as her taking her final act of revenge against her husband, because he would lose her and her children, her brother, who would lose his 3 daughters, and then on her parents as well, because they would lose their grandchildren and herself as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I know this was a tough story to hear. It's very, very sad. Very shocking, to be honest, as well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think Diane did this on purpose? Do you think she had a medical attack? Do you think she just overestimated or underestimated what could have happened that day? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I would love to hear your opinions. If you guys have other case suggestions that you want me to look into, whether it's true crime or paranormal or some sort of unsolved mystery, I would love to hear your suggestions. Thank you guys for joining me on this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.